I inherited my aunt's farm in rural South Dakota, and the realtor's only warning was whatever you do, don't open the silo after dark. I laughed it off as small-town superstition until I heard my dead uncle's voice calling my name from inside it at 3 a.m., begging me to let him out so he could introduce me to the family.
Sarah Chun's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. 3 hours of highway stretched behind her, and it had nothing but endless fields of dying corn under a sky the color of old bruises. Her phone's GPS had given up 20 miles back, leaving her with a hand-drawn map from the lawyer's office and increasingly unhelpful road signs. The last sign before civilization disappeared entirely read Hendrick's Farm 2 miles. She had never met Vera. Her father's sister had been the family ghost story, the woman who'd married into farming money and lost her mind when her husband vanished without a trace. For 20 years, Vera had lived alone on 300 acres of South Dakota wasteland, refusing visitors, refusing help, refusing to leave, even when the bank threatened foreclosure. Then, 3 weeks ago, a mailman found her body in the farmhouse kitchen. Natural causes, they said. 73 years old, dead in her sleep. Sarah was the only living relative. Lucky her. The farmhouse emerged from the corn like a shipwreck, white paint peeling, in long strips, porch sagging under its own weight, windows dark as closed eyes. But it was the silo that caught Sarah's attention. Massive and cylindrical, it loomed behind the house like a concrete tombstone easily 50 feet tall. Rust stained its curved walls in patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like writing. Sarah killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence. Already she hated this place. Her phone buzzed once, a final death rattle of signal, and went dark. Perfect, she muttered, grabbing her overnight bag from the back seat. The plan was simple: one night to inventory the property, sign whatever papers the lawyer needed, and get the hell back to Sioux Falls by tomorrow afternoon. She'd sleep in her car if she had to. The realtor, a nervous woman named Paula who'd insisted on meeting Sarah at a gas station 30 miles away rather than at the property, had handed over the keys with shaking hands. "You're staying the night?" Paula had asked, her eyes too wide. "Just one. I want to get this over with," Sarah had replied. "Then listen to me." Paula had gripped Sarah's wrist, her fingers cold and urgent. "Whatever you do, don't open the silo after dark. You hear me? Not for anything." Sarah had pulled away, unnerved by the intensity. "Why would I open a grain silo?" she asked. "Just don't. Please." Paula had practically run back to her car. Small town weirdness, Sarah had decided. Every rural community had its superstitions, its ghost stories designed to scare outsiders and give locals something to gossip about over coffee at the diner. But now, standing in the overgrown yard as the sun sank lower, Sarah felt that same crawling unease. The smell hit her the moment she opened the door, that same rot she'd noticed outside, but stronger now, mixed with something chemical and sour. Sarah gagged, pulling her shirt over her nose as she stepped inside. The farmhouse was a shrine to obsession. Newspapers covered the floors in yellowing layers, dates ranging from 2003 to just a few weeks ago. The furniture had been pushed against the walls to make room for photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, covering every surface, tacked to the walls, spread across the floor in careful arrangements, all of the same man. Uncle Mike, Sarah assumed. Tall and broad-shouldered, with cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Mike standing by a tractor. Mike in the barn. Mike holding a pitchfork. Mike in infinite repetition. But in every single photograph, Aunt Vera's face had been scratched out with something sharp, leaving only violent gouges in the photo paper. "Jesus Christ, Vera," Sarah whispered. She moved through the house in a daze, cataloging the madness. In the kitchen, she found Vera's diary sitting on the counter, its leather cover water-stained and cracked. Sarah hesitated, then opened it. The early entries were mundane weather reports, grocery lists, complaints about the tractor. But they grew stranger as the years progressed. Mike's name appeared more frequently, always capitalized, always underlined. June 3, 2007, "Mike is still here. I can feel him. The land won't let him go." October 12, 2011, "The silo is full now. The preservation is complete. The Hendricks have always known. The land requires payment. January 8, 2019, he walks at night. I hear his boots on the gravel. He calls my name in that voice, Mike's voice, but I won't answer. I won't. Sarah flipped to the final entry dated just 2 days before Vera's death. I'm so tired. 20 years of keeping them contained. 20 years of feeding the silo. But I'm the last Hendricks now. When I die, who will maintain the preservation? Who will keep them fresh? The land will find someone. It always does. A chill ran down Sarah's spine despite the stifling heat. She looked out the kitchen window at the silo dark against the purple twilight. The padlock glinted in the dying light. Her rational mind said this was dementia, grief-induced psychosis, the ravings of a woman who'd lived too long alone with her trauma. But something deeper, something primal whispered that Vera had been trying to warn whoever came after her. Sarah closed the diary and checked her watch. 7:47 p.m. Still light enough to explore the barn, maybe check the property boundaries. Shed saved the silo inspection for tomorrow morning in full daylight with pepper spray in her pocket and her car keys in hand. She spent the next hour going through the barn, old equipment, moldy hay, nothing remarkable. By the time she returned to the house, full darkness had fallen. The kind of darkness that only exists miles from any light pollution, so complete it felt solid. Sarah locked the front door and wedged a chair under the handle. Irrational maybe, but it made her feel better. She spread her sleeping bag on the couch. The bedroom felt too personal, too much like sleeping in a dead woman's skin, and tried to settle in. The house creaked and groaned around her. Old wood settling, pipes expanding, normal sounds. Nothing to worry about. At 11:30 p.m. she finally started to drift off. At 3:00 a.m. she woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Boot heels on stone. Coming from the direction of the silo. Sarah's eyes snapped open. She lay frozen in her sleeping bag listening. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed against the walls, thick and expectant. Then Sarah. Her name drawn out like a sigh in a man's voice. Deep and cold, and somehow wrong, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Sarah-chan, I know you're in there. She wasn't breathing, couldn't breathe. Every muscle locked rigid. Come to the silo, Sarah. Your aunt wants to meet you properly. Your uncle wants to say hello. The whole family is waiting. We've been waiting so long. The voice was coming from directly outside the front door. Let me out, Sarah. Let us out. We've been so patient. The silo keeps us fresh, keeps us preserved, but we're ready now. Ready to welcome you home. Something scraped against the door. Not a hand. Too hard for that. Like bone on wood. The Hendricks always come home, Sarah. The land requires payment. Every generation. And you're the last one. The last one. More footsteps now. Multiple sets. Different rhythms. Circling the house in the darkness. Sarah grabbed her phone with shaking hands. Dead. Completely dead, even though Shed charged it in the car. She had no weapon. No way to call for help. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and between her and them acres of corn and darkness. The scratching at the door intensified, now at the windows too, all around the house. And voices, multiple voices, now calling her name in harmony, some high, some low, all wrong. Sarah, come to the silo. Open the door. Let us out. We're family. We're fresh. The land has been waiting. The Hendricks always come home. Then, cutting through the others, a woman's voice. Cracked with age, but unmistakable. Sarah, baby, it's Aunt Vera. I'm sorry I never visited. I'm sorry I stayed away. But I'm here now. We're all here now. In the silo. Waiting. Fresh and perfect and together. Don't you want to meet your family? You're dead, Sarah whispered. You're all dead. Laughter. Cold and hollow echoing from multiple throats. The silo keeps us fresh, dear. Hasn't anyone told you? The Hendricks discovered it in 1887, the preservation chamber. The land showed us. The land taught us. Store them right, treat them proper, and they never really die. They just wait. Fresh, forever. The scratching stopped. Silence crashed over the house like a wave. Sarah counted to 60. Then 60 again. Nothing. No sounds. No voices. Just the hammer of her own heartbeat and the whisper of blood in her ears. She couldn't stay here. Wouldn't stay here. Darkness or not, isolation or not, she was getting in her car and driving until she hit civilization, even if it took all night. Sarah rolled out of her sleeping bag and crept to the window. She pulled the curtain back an inch and looked out. They were standing in a circle around her car.
You think an old farm is a fresh start, Maya Chun did. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it. Something was wrong. Dusty furniture, abandoned belongings, and a wedding photo that said, "God help us." That night, footsteps echoed above her, slow and deliberate. In the morning, the barn door creaked open on its own. Cages, strange chemicals, experiments that should never exist. And then she saw the fields moving toward her. The farm wasn't empty, it was alive. And it had been waiting. Maya Chun thought she'd found the deal of a lifetime when she stumbled across the listing for Blackwood Farm on a dusty corner of a real estate website. 40 acres in rural Pennsylvania, a Victorian farmhouse with original hardwood floors, and a massive red barn that looked like something out of a postcard, all for less than the cost of a studio apartment in Philadelphia. The photos showed overgrown fields and peeling paint, but Maya saw potential where others saw decay. She was tired of the city, tired of the noise and the crowds, and the feeling that she was slowly suffocating in her tiny apartment. At 31, she wanted space to breathe, to create, to build something with her own hands. The farm seemed like a second chance at life. The seller was eager, almost desperate. An elderly man named Harold Pritchard, who lived 3 states away and had inherited the property from a distant uncle. He'd never even visited it, he told her over the phone, his voice shaking slightly. When Maya asked why it had sat empty for so long, he'd gone quiet for a moment before saying something about the local market being slow and the property being too remote for most buyers. He accepted her offer within hours, and the closing happened so fast it made her head spin. Her lawyer had warned her about buying property without a thorough inspection, but Maya had been too excited to listen. She signed the papers on a Friday and drove out to take possession the following Monday, her car packed with everything she owned. The farm looked different in person than it had in the photos. Darker somehow, though that might have been the overcast sky or the way the massive oak trees surrounding the property seemed to lean inward, creating a canopy that blocked out much of the afternoon light. The house itself was larger than she'd expected. 3 stories of weather-beaten white siding and black shutters, with a wraparound porch that sagged in places. But it was hers, and that thought filled her with a giddy excitement as she climbed the front steps, old wood creaking under her weight. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and the front door swung open with a groan that echoed through the empty interior. The smell hit her first. Not the mustiness she'd expected from a house that had been closed up for years, but something else, something chemical and sharp that made her eyes water. She propped the door open to let in fresh air and began exploring, her footsteps echoing on the scarred hardwood floors. The furniture had been left behind, which struck her as odd. Chairs and tables, and even a couch in the living room, all covered in thick layers of dust. In the kitchen, she found dishes still in the cabinets, canned goods in the pantry, their labels faded but still readable. It was as if the previous occupants had simply walked out one day and never returned. Upstairs, the bedrooms were similarly abandoned. In the master bedroom, she found a wedding photo on the dresser, the glass cracked, but the image still visible. A young couple, probably from the 1950s based on their clothing, standing in front of this very house. The bride looked radiantly happy, but there was something about the groom's smile that seemed forced, his eyes not quite matching his expression. Maya picked up the frame, intending to set it aside, and noticed something written on the back in faded pencil. Margaret and Thomas Blackwood, June 1952. God help us. That night, Maya slept in her sleeping bag on the living room floor, too exhausted to care about the strangeness of the abandoned belongings or the odd inscription on the photo. She woke around 3 in the morning to the sound of footsteps on the floor above her. Slow, deliberate steps, back and forth, like someone pacing. Her heart hammered as she grabbed her phone and used its flashlight to illuminate the staircase. The footsteps stopped. The house fell silent. Maya told herself it was old wood settling, the house adjusting to her presence after years of emptiness, but she didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, she decided to explore the barn. The structure was even larger up close. Its red paint faded to a dull rust color, and the doors were secured with a heavy chain and padlock. Maya found bolt cutters in the tool shed and made quick work of the lock, the chain falling away with a metallic clatter that seemed too loud in the morning stillness. She pulled the doors open, and the smell that had bothered her in the house was overwhelming here, strong enough to make her gag. Chemical and rotten and wrong. The barn's interior was dim, light filtering through gaps in the walls in dusty beams. As her eyes adjusted, Maya saw what looked like a laboratory taking up half the space. Tables covered with beakers and test tubes, all coated in dust and cobwebs. Notebooks stacked everywhere, their pages yellowed and brittle, and along the back wall, cages. Dozens of wire cages of various sizes, their doors hanging open, all of them empty. Maya's stomach turned as she moved closer and saw the scratches on the metal. Deep gouges, as if something had tried desperately to claw its way out. She picked up one of the notebooks with trembling hands and began to read. The entries were written in a precise, scientific hand and dated from 1952 to 1959. Thomas Blackwood had been a chemist, and he'd been conducting experiments. The early entries were clinical, describing attempts to create a fertilizer that would revolutionize farming, increase crop yields 100-fold, end world hunger. But something had gone wrong. The chemical compound he developed did increase growth, but it didn't stop. Plants exposed to it grew rapidly, aggressively, and they changed. The notes became increasingly frantic as Blackwood described plants that moved when no one was watching, that seemed to orient themselves toward warmth and movement, that grew tendrils that reached and grasped. Maya's hands shook as she turned the pages. Blackwood had tested the compound on animals next, trying to understand the mechanism. The results had been catastrophic. Rapid cellular growth that didn't stop, animals that grew too large for their bodies, their bones breaking under their own weight, their organs failing. And then the mutation started. The final entry was dated October 15, 1959. I've made a terrible mistake. I thought I could control it, contain it, but it's in the soil now. It's in everything. Margaret says she can hear them at night, the things that used to be our livestock, moving through the fields. They're changing, evolving. I've contacted the government, but they won't come. They say I'm insane. I'm going to burn everything. If you're reading this, you need to leave. Don't plant anything. Don't dig in the soil. Don't let it touch you. And whatever you do, don't go into the fields after dark. Maya dropped the notebook and backed toward the barn doors, her mind reeling. This had to be the ravings of a madman, the paranoid delusions of someone who'd been isolated too long. But as she emerged into the daylight, she looked at the fields surrounding the property with new eyes. The grass wasn't just overgrown. It was wrong. Too green, too thick. And as she watched, a section of it seemed to ripple, moving against the wind rather than with it. That's when she noticed the dead birds. Dozens of them, scattered around the perimeter of the fields, as if they'd been trying to fly away and simply dropped from the sky. And the trees, those massive oaks she'd admired yesterday, their roots were visible above the ground in places, thick as a man's torso, and they seemed to pulse slightly like something breathing. Maya ran back to the house, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She had to leave. She had to get out of here right now. But as she reached for her car keys, she heard it. A rustling sound from outside, growing louder. She looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. The grass in the nearest field was moving, not swaying but actually moving, advancing toward the house in a slow, deliberate wave. And rising from it, silhouettes that might have once been animals but were now something else entirely. Their forms twisted and elongated, covered in what looked like vegetation that had grown through and around their bodies. Maya grabbed her keys and ran for her car, but the driveway was already blocked. The grass had spread across it, thick and rope-like, and she could see things moving beneath it, tunneling, spreading. She was trapped. The chemical that Thomas Blackwood had created hadn't dissipated over the decades. It had been waiting, dormant in the soil, for someone new to arrive, for fresh organic matter to fuel its continued growth. As darkness fell and the things from the field surrounded the house, Maya understood why the farm had been abandoned, why Harold Pritchard had been so desperate to sell, why he'd never once visited the property he'd inherited. This place wasn't a farm anymore. It was a feeding ground. And she'd walked right into it, drawn by a price too good to be true and dreams of a fresh start. Now those dreams would fertilize the hungry soil, just like everyone else who'd been foolish enough to ignore the warnings and return to Blackwood Farm.